Hello, everyone. I am Supi, the founder of AppSec Santa, and today my guest is Shawn Simpson from Fortify. He's the senior product manager for Fortify, and maybe in general, Micro Focus Dust products for all. And we will be talking about Webinspect mostly today. So, Shawn, can you help us to secure our applications?
I think we can. DAST is a really important part of that. While there's a lot of ways to take a look at the application, I think getting that black box view, really that outside in, to really find those findings and actually exploit some of the vulnerabilities in the app before somebody else does. I think it's a really important part of that security in depth that we provide.
Correct, indeed. And like the famous question is like, what is Webinspect? Why we should use it? Who using it for what? Can you give us, some broad understanding about it?
Definitely. So, Webinspect at its core it's a DAST tool. So Dynamic Application Security Testing is what that stands for. And it came from the idea of a set of tools to really help pen testers. A pen tester comes on site, they're looking from that outside in view, but there's a lot of the work that could be automated. So that was kind of the founding idea of Webinspect, is how do we help pen testers in their job automate some of the work that can be done. And that was a great idea to start with, but it's really grown over the years from there. It's DAST tooling is a very mature product at this point. It's been around for decades, and so Webinspect takes that outside in approach. But Webinspect itself is the core piece of that. We use it not only as a standalone tool for Webinspect itself, but it's the engine in some of our other offerings. We have an enterprise piece that we use for automation. We have some FOD in our Fortify Hosted for cloud and service offerings.
Fortify on demand, right?
Fortify on demand, yes, FOD. Yeah, so Scan Central DAST, that's a piece that it fits in with our software security center, which is really our dashboard. It is a tool for triaging vulnerabilities, getting reporting, getting trending, things like that. And the Scan Central DAST part of it is a plugin that fits in with that enterprise dashboard and allows automation of DAST scans, along with SAS scans and any of our other pieces, and then centralized place to triage things, not really look at just that single scan. Webinspect is great at getting that deep dive into a single scan. Scan Central DAST and SSC, they really give you that broader view of how an application is trending over time, how your portfolios are looking.
Yeah, and you mentioned like we start talking about like it's a pen testing tool, but I know that like many enterprises using Webinspect when they are scanning like hundreds of applications. So it's there's kind of like during the involvement of this the pen testing culture, as the industry move forward, like any normal, even like a small and medium businesses now have like over 20 applications. So they with the like regular pen testing approach, is just like you have two websites to dig in and you continuously check the same stuff. So the tooling was designed in the beginning was like that. So the usual users like pen testers were using when they are doing their security checks, but now the game kind of like change. Every company now coming and asking like, we have 50 applications, 200 APIs. Are we going to scan that? And this totally another game. So like, how is this the enterprise coming place like to do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I hear a lot is once you hit a certain size, every company is a software company. It's just the modern reality. Every company has many apps, even no matter what their primary business is, and they all need to be secured. So regardless of the scale they need, that's what Scan Central DAST and SSC are really there for. It could just be a single Webinspect sensor that's automated just to make it so somebody doesn't have to sit there and babysit it, and they can get the results all the way. We have customers scanning hundreds of apps on a regular cadence. maybe every nightly build, things like that. So it's really, it fits really well in the different use cases of, there's the modern DevOps where it is on that nightly build or check-in. You have the more traditional sort of gated models that were there, everyone's got to scan before a release or something like that. We try to accommodate all of those because we find, you have the very mature software companies who they think agile, they think modern DevOps. They need a certain set of tooling, a certain set of support. Then you have, someone who may be supporting brick and mortar stores out there, or, they have a factory somewhere, but they still have apps. They don't have a mature DevOps, but they need to secure stuff. So we try to accommodate them as well.
And so you are the product manager of, the Fortify, like, Webinspect. And when you're designing it, like, I'm sure you have some different personas. So like pen testing company who has, 20 pen testers working, how they can collaborate. This is totally different way of using the tool versus, like you said, company who has 100 applications. So when you are improving the tool, I'm talking about your roadmap. So where you are like putting most of the time, like, or how do you address these two different personas issues? Like, how do you, delegate the energy?
One of the things we have done is try to break up our development teams to accommodate those different ones. So I have a core team that really just works on Webinspect. All they're thinking about is scanning. They're thinking about how can we scan the latest APIs? What are the latest vulnerabilities coming out? How can we secure them? Authentication, how do we log into applications? And I really want that team focused on that and to give them the ability to truly think about not only what's out there now, but what's coming. It's just security for them. And that's the core Webinspect. But then we can take Webinspect itself, because it's such a mature engine, and repackage it for those other use cases and for those other personas. So we have our other teams, our Scan Central Dash, who they're thinking, they're not focused as much on securing the application. They're really thinking, how do people scan at scale? How can
scaling?
If I've got 500 applications and I've got to scan them monthly, quarterly, whatever it is, how do I do that? How do I make sure my pipelines aren't breaking unnecessarily? How do I do? So I've got that team doing that, and then we've got we've got the services team with Fortify On Demand, really thinking about how do we do this not only at scale but really automated as well, where it's as little touch as possible, because if we're talking about scale, Fortify On Demand, it's a very large scale. So
Fortify On Demand is coming with the managed service, right? So you actually doing the whole thing, like scan, triage, clearing the false positive.
So we have Dynamic and Dynamic Plus with Fortify On Demand. Dynamic is, we take basically a service request of, a URL with some authentication and what is the primary concerns you may have, get some feedback from it. And then we run that automated scan. It's a lightweight triage. We go through and look for false positives. And that's kind of the base offering for Dynamic. And then we have Dynamic Plus, where we actually have a pen tester who's going to, not only are they going to validate all of those vulnerabilities we find, but they're also going to find the ones that you can't really find in an automated way. Automated tools are great. They cover a lot of breadth. There are some vulnerabilities out there that either due to time or complexity, you really need a human in the loop, and that's where the Dynamic Plus offering comes in. And then we also have that for mobile as well, and Webinspect has used that. So for scanning mobile apps, we have a mobile and a mobile plus too.
Is it about like native apps are we talking about in here?
Yeah, we both do the HTTP traffic, and then also take a look at the binary and a lightweight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Like, so the Webinspect actually you can scan for.
Yeah, and that's with both Fortify On Demand and the standalone Webinspect. We can take a look at. It's really for Webinspect, it's the HTTP traffic. So we can stand up a little proxy,
Yeah.
and we're watching all that traffic go into the server. But that Mobile Plus offering, we take it a step further and really dig into
like
the app itself.
Full pen testing service approach.
Yep.
And I have tested like a couple of times, and I have seen it like recently as well. So you guys like Webinspect running on Windows, and how you actually like scaling that? Like, isn't it a
so
trouble?
Windows is a challenge, and you're bringing up roadmap. That's a big piece of my roadmap right now. Is we're in a transitional phase where I always see the Windows version of Webinspect is going to be here. We have a huge community of pen testers who, it's one of their core tools. They need all of those little features, all of the little tools that come with it, because it really helps them in their job. So that's going to be there. But the nice thing is, Microsoft's done a great job with .NET, 5 and 6, making it cross-platform. So we're working right now on a Linux version of Webinspect that is going to be for those automation use cases, so that we can really start thinking about the Dockerized deployments using Kubernetes to really scale that. So those are going to come up and down, and that's going to be using that Scan Central DAST. Our Fortify Hosted is going to be using that. And by the way, that Scan Central DAST piece is a Docker deployment right now. So customers can use that in cloud or private cloud.
Their own private cloud,
Yeah. So.
Okay, that's great, because it's like those, if you look around like Webinspect, even people who love Webinspect, they come with like the two questions: when there will be a Linux version of it, the second, when you will the update the UI, or like put some fancy graphics out there. So that the two question is the frequent ones.
Yep, the Linux one I hope to have soon. That's a big priority for me, because Windows on Docker it's a painful thing to deal with. The Linux, it's easy and it's scalable. So that one will be here soon. And then I get that question too a lot about Webinspect and the UI. It has been there for a while, and the answer I usually get is, I want to focus on finding the latest vulnerability. I want to make sure I can log into your app no matter what it is. We've got a really cool feature around two-factor authentication that came out last year, where we can put a little Android app on a phone and pass SMS tokens.
You're simulating the second factor as well and automating it. That's really smart.
So I have choices. I can have my team working on a brand new UI, or I can work on automation. And right now, I think really making sure we stay current, really making sure we can scan every app, and reducing the workload of people, doing things like that two-factor authentication, doing things like the latest APIs. It's just a higher priority for me. But at some point, we are talking about doing a refresh on the UI as well. Maybe with that Linux version, maybe doing like a web-based one or something like that. So it's coming. It's just, I think securing the app is just priority number one.
Yeah, like from my point of view, as I'm, reviewing and using these tools and promoting all the time, is that Webinspect is there for decade. I know to acquisition, it moved, a tool is there, team is there developing it, and for this application security tools, after a certain point, I think the most important value comes from the maturity of it. Like how much of those edge cases that you actually cover is the main differentiator, I will say. It's not like a feature fight. So you said this, the second factor, it's a good thing. It's actually a great thing. So it's a blocker to automating for those, the second factor application requirements. But on the other side, there's always, you can add some, little features, this and that. But the most important thing is that when a company, let's say a company who has application for 10 years old applications, like to be able to cover those edge cases as well, those maturity become the, the unique differentiator. So
Yeah.
if you guys, like if you're doing it, like turning into the modern deployment with like a Dockerized approach to make it like a scalable, because with the Windows, yes, it's good that I install in somewhere and I'm running scans, and it's a great, pen testing tool suite that you found, like fuzzers, everything, the macro recordings there, sequence recording out there, it works perfectly. But if you can make this in a way automated for the numbers of hundreds, that will be opening another door.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a big focus for my enterprise team, is making sure we can do all of this at scale. The thing you're talking about, maturity, conversation we've been having internally is API security. It's such a big part right now. Everyone's got APIs. You write an app, you write an API for it. It's either used for testing or to glue it together with something else. But we've got 20 years of experience with SOAP testing. You may think, well, SOAP is dead. No, everyone's got this legacy SOAP app out there that we don't have to rewrite the code for it.
Yeah,
we've been testing SOAP for years. So my team right now, we're looking at things like GraphQL. GraphQL has come in and really thrown, a wrench into the gears of security teams, because it creates new ways of doing it. But when you look at it from a technical perspective, it's so similar to SOAP. So we're reusing some of that expertise we have for the modern apps, and how can we do those at scale is always one of the first things we think of. Because if the days of having a user sit there in front of an application and babysit it and make sure it's working, they're gone. Everyone's has too much to do. So it's always a core piece of what we're looking at.
Yeah, and that's kind of this is why some people are really annoyed about like using tools, because of some half-baked technologies. Like you use a tool to make things more efficient, then it turned to be that you actually spending like more time, like those telephone automatic services, like you call the bank, you have some issues to get it through, and then you push 20 buttons and you still need to end up with an actual call center person to end up. So it's a half-baked technology, is always annoy people, and the maturity is the medicine for that. Because for the company who start to if you start your dust journey 2 years, 3 years now, that you guys addressed already some issues like 5 years ago, because you have seen those problems.
Now,
those are not like there's no handbook of those the edge cases, sometimes called like exotic the vulnerabilities and so on.
Yeah, it'd be a hard one to get into right now, because it is a very mature market at this point. There's the companies who've been doing it and doing it well, have the things that they have differentiated themselves with, and it would be a tough one to break into at this point, because in the web, the internet, it is growing so fast, and it continues to. That's not going to stop. So if you've got to reinvent, the last 20 years of edge cases, how can you keep up with where it's going?
Yeah, it will be a tough racket.
Yeah.
And when I'm using like Webinspect, it's like I get through and I know the things, how it works, but it's like quite feature heavy. There's a lot of things going on for a user that just starting tomorrow. Like, how do you make sure that those guys are successful with the tool? Like, do you have some education, or is there like learning curve like for?
Webinspect, there is definitely a learning curve. It is a pretty powerful tool. It really depends on where the customer is looking to go. Is the first thing we want to have that conversation with. Are you looking to get started? Are you looking, or do you already understand the AppSec space and what you need to do? If you're looking at scale, we're not even going to point you at Webinspect right away. We're going to say Scan Central DAST, which does have, it's not a pen testing tool with like a Scan Central DAST or Fortify On Demand. That it's really designed for scaling. So it has fewer features. It has the important ones like two-factor authentication, but you're not going to really drill down and run a specific fuzz test against some parameter with it the way you can with Webinspect. But so we have both professional services, which are really great at coming in, and they can offer both specific training. They can offer custom solutions. We have a Fortify Unplugged channel actually on YouTube is where a lot of people like to go. I actually just created a demo of Webinspect. It kind of walks you through your first scan. If you just joined a team and Webinspect's going to be one of your tools, that's a short little 10-12-minute video of, here's my first scan. What do I do? What are all these features? Why am I doing them? And then we have a number of very complex features that are explained on there. There's some really cool things you can do with our macro recorder. That you may not realize.
Adding business logic type of.
Exactly. And so we have videos on there that walk you through some of those. And what we find is, there's a common journey a lot of customers go through from that very first scan they're running to, okay, I know what I'm doing now, and I've got this special app that has this, and we have a great support team who have decades of white papers and knowledge-based articles on how to handle all of those things, and they can both support people, but we also have a community portal where customers can go in and look at what have other customers, how have they solved these problems. So
like FAQ type of it, or even like a support ticket type of.
Exactly. They can see both some of our internal experts will quite often respond and give suggestions of what to do, and so we find a lot of interaction comes from that, and sometimes product ideas come from it too. So I monitor those things as well, sort of see what people are looking to do, and then for our larger customers, we also have customer success managers who they just reach out on typically sometimes monthly, at least quarterly, to really make sure everyone, they bought a product, they bought it for a reason. Are they getting the value out of it? Is it helping them get their job done? And those customer success managers often will schedule meetings with me just to help them get the most out of the product and give feedback as well. So
that's what I mean. Because it's a huge product, and I know this from an experience that like sometimes what you think that you're selling is not exactly the same thing what customer bought. So
absolutely.
I was when I'm talking with the team and having meetings, so they were showing how they're using it, but it is like there is way better options, and maybe they use like 10% of the solution, and with more the time wasting it because of that. So I think that education part is underestimated for a long time in the industry, maybe just because that pen testers were using it, who is like really professional with these tools and they know what they need to do, but the users are changed, and that education, like customer success team interaction, I think it's quite valuable, especially the QA part that you mentioned, like the question and answers.
And that Fortify Unplugged channel, we get a lot of interaction too through the comment section there. We have people who review every one of them, and sometimes they'll reach out to me. It's like, hey, I couldn't answer this. Do you know how someone could do this one? It's a great way of getting feedback and keeping in contact with the community, because there's a lot of people out there who are both seasoned and new users of Webinspect.
And how the pricing works? Is it
so we have a couple options. Webinspect itself, you can have just basically individual copies of Webinspect. So one person has a copy of Webinspect, they're a named user of it, and that fits great with that pen tester. Or maybe you have a centralized security team. Quite often we'll see that there's a team who they're dedicated to scanning a portfolio, and so each person on the team will have a copy of it. Consultants, that's another one. Sometimes people go on site, so we have what we call our concurrent users. That's one where I don't need it all the time. I may only need it for an engagement.
Okay.
I can check out a license for Webinspect, and they use it for a period of time. And when they're not using it, somebody else in the organization.
Someone else can use it. Yeah. It's more mobile.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's one where.
And for both of these licenses, they don't have any target limit or anything like that, right?
Most of them are typically a perpetual. So you either get it, for a year or for a perpetual one, which would be forever. And then, it's not limited to scanning.
Not like 10 FQDN or such.
No, we do have some consultant licenses where, like a consulting company who may need to just go for a very targeted engagement can do things like that, where they're looking for, I know I only need to scan one app or 30, but most users we find really prefer to have their own dedicated copy of Webinspect. Once you're using it a lot. It's not something you're just going to.
So definitely a pen tester case. So you go,
you
don't know how many websites you're going to scan this year. So if you have 15 pen testers in the team, you need to have 15 copy for those guys. Okay.
And then for Scan Central, that's more for the enterprise user, people looking more scale. That's again, you buy by the sensor. So a sensor is a copy of Webinspect that gets automated by Scan Central, and you can buy, I think the minimum is 2 when you get, and that gives you access to Scan Central and SSC, and you can scale up to as many as you want.
Is it on-premise?
Yeah, so that's the on-premise offering of that. We also have what we call Fortify Hosted, where we take our entire on-premise portfolio, Scan Central DAS, Scan Central SAST, which is our software, our SCA and SSE, and they all run in a cloud offering that we provide the infrastructure, we provide the support, the maintenance, all the upgrading, and you can just log in and use it. So that's
is it for like built in all these 3, like the composition analyst, SAST, and DAS? So it's like full application security.
Yes, it's our full on-premise stack, and we call it Fortify Hosted. It's a fairly recent offering, but it's for customers who they love the product, but they don't want to host it themselves. They would prefer somebody else manage the infrastructure and for them. They just want to use it, and we're getting we're finding a lot of positive feedback with that. Using
tool is something, but like the maintaining, updating, and installing it require another person for that. So I think it's quite a good offering for users, especially if it comes with all the other products as well.
It does, and it also comes with, I believe, a technical account manager who can really help get the value out of it. So they get a certain amount of, there's an onboarding period to make sure everyone understands, because it's a lot of tooling. It's a lot of product to learn it quickly.
And that one with the number of targets, like licensed by the number of targets, right?
So no, it's one again where they can purchase by the number of sensors. So we have a calculator of how many apps you have. We kind of get a size, how big you think the apps are going to be, how many developers do you have, how often do you want to scan, and then we can give estimates of, we think you'll need this number of sensors, this number of users, things like that.
So the sensors is the name of like the agent. So it's about like how many concurrent scan that you can run.
Exactly. So when we take Webinspect and automate it, we typically refer to it as a sensor. It's something that is being managed by Scan Central DAS. So.
And those are hosted on your cloud account and such.
Exactly. But that is really just us standing up that on-premise stack. So for customers who really, they want everything internal, they don't, that there's still a number of customers out there who they don't want their data getting out there. They can stand that up, or we can host it for them. And then Fortify on Demand, that's another one where it's by assessment units. So you can buy a certain number of those, and there's they can scale, and it may be a couple assessment units for that lightweight dynamic scan. If you want to do a heavier weight, the dynamic plus, where we really go in and find the manual findings, that'll be more assessment units, and it's how we do the pricing on that one.
Okay, so it's more about like a service, so the pricing is
exactly.
I assume it's quite different.
Yeah.
And as a last questions, you mentioned a little bit, but if you look at the roadmap, what we should be expecting for the next release? You mentioned like the Linux version of it. I don't think that's coming next month. Is it so?
No, that's not coming next month. There's a lot of work into upgrading that, but we're looking at trying to get that this year. We're doing a lot of things around APIs. We've got a lot of stuff with that coming. We already have a pretty complete story with APIs around. We have an integration with Postman. It's kind of an industry standard at this point for interacting with it. So, but we're looking at really getting that complete API solution. So things like API discovery, I think, is a really important one in there. As I said, everyone's got APIs, whether they know it or not. They're what's gluing the applications together. And sometimes, you've got the task of, I've got to scan this app. Well, if you don't know there's a API
what is this app
there,
actually like?
What is it? It's probably not a single thing. It's really a collection of things. So we've got some really cool things coming where we can discover those APIs mid-scan, through Swagger definitions, picking up on, a GraphQL query and figuring out what all is there, and really trying to simplify that. So the person running the scan doesn't have to be the expert on the application. Kind of that, the sort of industry term is shift left. Allow the small security team to manage this stuff and move more and more of the kicking off the scans to the developers and the QA, but they don't really want to spend all that time, doing it. So we want to do as much of it for them as we can. And the API work is the big one for that. But APIs and Linux are kind of the big things we're working on this year. Okay,
sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here today and answering all this question. I'm sure people will enjoy it. I enjoy it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.